What does that no-count think he's doing?
I'm doing the only right thing. I'm stopping you.
You fool! You've seen you're no match for me.
Take this, you! Tri-beam!
Hello everyone, Poohead189 here, and today is a special technique breakdown. Today we will be talking about the tri-beam, or kikoho, also called Qi Kung Pao in Chinese, as well as dive a bit into the character of Tien, otherwise known as Tien Shinhan or Tin Shinhan. It's not a full character breakdown, but after thinking about it, there's a few things we need to understand about Tien in order to fully understand the technique, as well as the upgraded version he developed, otherwise known as the Neo Tri-beam or Shin Kikoho. It's not an exaggeration to say that Tien is one of, if not the most skilled fighter in the Z fighters. He has the ability to learn techniques with an ease that is on par with major villains like Cell or Boo. When first introduced, he not only learned the Kamehameha and how to repel it on his first try, but he learned the Mafabu or Evil Containment Wave, a technique mastered by an extremely small number of practitioners within a day, even with the stress of losing Roshi and his best friend Chaozu mere hours before. He was just 19 years old, but he knew more techniques than almost any character introduced except maybe Master Roshi, and he continued to learn more with extreme ease. In fact, there are some techniques Tin Shinhan created that only he can learn because of his unique physiology, at least according to the Daizenshuu. The multiform and the Shiokin, also called the Four Witches technique, cannot be learned by anyone else. In the anime, it does show characters like Krillin and Piccolo and Cell utilizing the multiform, but in actuality, only Tien can use it in the canon. However, the tri-beam itself is not one of those techniques, actually, nor did Tien create it. In fact, we don't know exactly who created the tri-beam. It is heavily implied the Crane Hermit or Suru Senin created it, as it is a signature technique of the Crane School, and we know he was the founder of the Crane School, as his own master was Lord Mutaito, who trained both Roshi and the Crane Hermit. However, Roshi also states that he had heard of people dying from using the technique, which means there is a possibility the technique was floating around or was created by an unknown source. However, it is most likely the case that Roshi is referring to other Crane students, as both Roshi and the Crane Hermit are centuries old, so it appears that the Crane Hermit likely lost more than one student when he attempted teaching it to them, and it's never stated if even the Crane Hermit himself ever truly mastered it, like how King Kai invented the Kaioken, but was never able to fully master it himself. We just don't know. What we do know is that the tri-beam or kikoho is extremely difficult to learn. In fact, the only reason why we know that it's not unique to Tien is because Roshi says it was taught to him, but there is no time in the manga that anyone else uses it except Tien, and the only time we see it in filler is when a Cell Jr. uses it against Super Saiyan 2 Gohan. But as I said, that's just anime canon and not the source material, so we can surmise that not only is it immensely difficult to learn, but even when one masters it, it's an extreme risk to use. Dragon Ball Super has done a pretty poor job of showcasing the technique, as it now seems to be Tien's signature generic ki blast, used for any situation like a spam attack. That is certainly not the case in the original manga, so let's get into it. But first, we need to ask why Tien ever learned it in the first place, and then why he improved it. The other techniques I've broken down have had pretty straightforward reasons. Yamcha created the Spirit Ball or Sokidan in order to be more effective in the 23rd World Martial Arts Tournament. Piccolo created the Special Beam Cannon in order to kill Goku, and Goku learned the Kaioken and Spirit Bomb or Genki Dama in order to fight Vegeta and Nappa during the Saiyan Saga. The tri-beam has a bit more to it, however. The tri-beam, or kikoho, as with all of the techniques Tien and Chaozu know when first introduced, should be viewed through the lens of their origin, which is that of an assassin. The Dodon Ray, or Dodon Pa, for instance, has the power of a Kamehameha with the pinpoint precision of a bullet, or a Frieza's death beam. It's easy to see how that could be an assassin's weapon. We see that when Mercenary Tao, or Tao Pepe, nearly impales Goku when they first fought. In fact, it would have stabbed through Goku's heart if he didn't have a Dragon Ball in the way. The Solar Flare, or Taioken, is obviously used to disable an enemy, like smoke powder for a ninja or a flashbang used by a SWAT team. The Tri-Beam, on the other hand, seems to be made as a last resort, a technique to be used when all else has failed to kill an enemy. The Tri-Beam itself honestly has many similarities to King Kai's signature techniques. For one, it's obviously extremely powerful. However, it has a similarity to the Kaioken in that overusage or not being careful in its usage can easily lead to the death of its practitioner. And it is similar to the Spirit Bomb because it also uses Life Force, or Genki, as its main source of power. That's why it's such a strong attack. However, while the Spirit Bomb takes minute bits of Genki from thousands of organisms, the Tri-Beam takes a large amount of Genki from a single source, the practitioner. When Tien first introduces the technique, Roshi is appalled that the Crane Hermit taught the technique to Tien for how dangerous it is to both the practitioner and their opponent. Tien seems to know how to use it to keep himself from dying, but it does take an extreme toll on him. During the finals of the 22nd tourney, Tien and Roshi had no doubts in their mind that if the technique hit Goku, he would just die, and Chaozu was shocked that Tien would consider using it, as it is very dangerous for Tien himself. In the 23rd tourney, when Tien was telling Goku he had another technique to use on him, Goku asked if he was going to use the Kikoho, and Tien replied that if he was going to use that one, there was a possibility they would both die. And of course, during the Saiyan arc, when Tien is beaten and without an arm, he does die when he uses it against Nappa, so it is not something to ever be used lightly. The technique itself was introduced in chapter 133 of the manga, and in episode 100 of the anime. It has a destructive effect, hitting an area with the effect of an artillery strike. Now, I've heard some anti-Tien jobbers before describe it as a technique that just pushes very hard, but that is just a fundamental misunderstanding of the manga. It is a move that obliterates, or at worst, wounds its target. Now, though Tien did not create the move, it is easy to see why Toriyama gave it to him, considering Tien has 3 eyes and he needs to form a triangle in order to use it. People often wonder how the Tri-Beam forms a square hole in the ground, and I've seen some pretty funny memes saying it's a geometric impossibility. The reason is actually quite simple. It's because the beam itself is not a 2D triangle, but it's either a diamond or a pyramid. A diamond, because the greatest girth of a diamond is at its center, which can be squared, or a pyramid because the base of its form is a large square, and it is merely the largest part of either shape that is carved into the ground. It probably is a pyramid instead of a diamond, however, because since Tien uses it to save everyone by creating a shelter at the 23rd tourney when Piccolo is about to wipe out the surrounding area with a ki blast, and it would not be a great place to hide if there was not a square bottom. But it's never stated, so that's just guesswork. Now, while we know that the move is extremely strong, it's extremely hard to know the actual strength or how to gauge any kind of multiplier. Tien and Goku were about even at the final match in the 22nd tournament, but Goku evidently would have died. Tien was slightly behind Goku during the 23rd tourney, but Tien was still confident that if Goku did not dodge it, he would be dead. And it's hard to really tell a lot about the usage of it during the Saiyan saga. Tien is clearly weaker after losing his arm and being beaten to the ground than his initial power of 1830, that's said in the Daizenshu. And of course, he is only using one arm. Honestly, when I first saw it as a kid, I had no idea he was actually using the Tri-Beam. Though, if you think about it, even half a triangle makes another triangle, so the one-handed version, I guess, is still possible. Also, this is a topic a lot of people disagree with me on, but I've never been entirely convinced the Saiyan Saga Tri-Beam, popularly called the Spirit Tri-Beam by fans since it kills Tien and he uses up all of his life force, I've never been fully convinced that it actually hits Nappa directly. Clearly it did hit Nappa, as when the smoke clears, his armor is now ruined, and he has a few new wounds and bruises on his body. But considering the power of the move shocked Piccolo, Krillin, Gohan, and even Nappa and Vegeta, and Tien was only using one arm to aim, it always seemed like it was implying that Nappa did not get hit by the brunt of it. In fact, even in the anime dubs, in fact multiple dubs, and might even be in the sub too, Vegeta says that if Nappa had been hit directly, that would have been a huge problem. Obviously, that is not, proving any sort of canon, but apparently even the studios thought the same thing. But that's just my opinion. If I found an interview that said that that thought was wrong, I wouldn't be too surprised. But Piccolo and Krillin and Tien himself roughly knew Nappa's strength, and yet they were all amazed he survived. Piccolo even wonders if Nappa is immortal when he appears out of the smoke. That, and while the Tri-Beam is not a move meant to push, it clearly does push an opponent, but Nappa kept himself stationary in the air judging by the smoke. Although I will say, it is potentially the case that it is a Saiyan's inherent toughness that helped Nappa to survive, but I still think that it might have been a glancing hit. But again, that's just me. Either way, whether Nappa was hit full on or hit a bit to the side, Tien ultimately died from the expense of his life force. Again, the technique is not like a large Kamehameha, where it might drain you of ki, but you would feel no adverse effects, such as when Goku hits Cell with the instant transmission Kamehameha, or when he fires one at Android 19 when the heart virus is taking over. The Tri-Beam is taking away precious life force, or Genki, and performing it enough times or without complete control will kill you. Now let's move on to the technique's upgraded version, called the Neo Tri-Beam or Shin Kikoho. This technique is introduced in chapter 374 of the manga, and it's nothing short of groundbreaking, pun not intended. Tien does something here we really don't see anyone else do in the entire series. He takes one of the most dangerous and difficult to learn techniques, strips it of the majority of its weaknesses, and then multiplies its power in a way that might even outclass the Super Saiyan multiplier. And with this technique, he does what the androids, Piccolo, and the Super Saiyans could not, which is beat Cell to the ground and keep him there while Android 18 escapes. Like, look, I think Tien is a bit stronger than people usually give him credit for in the Android arc, but it's safe to say he is still weaker than Piccolo after the 3-year training arc, but before he fused with Kami, which means the Shin Kikoho is an astronomically powerful technique. Just think about it. Imagine the Android saga as a medieval knife fight, and everyone is sharpening their knives or trying to find bigger ones. Tien essentially walked into that alleyway with a fully loaded howitzer. Like, look at this image. It's crazy to think Tien has the power to kill everyone in this image except the Cell Juniors. And I have talked to many people on forums over the years who have some strange fixation on downplaying Tien's achievements, and one of the most common claims is that the technique merely pushes semi-perfect Cell. And while that is already disproved from the description of the Tri-Beam multiple times in the manga, we can also simply look at Cell when he emerges and see that he now sports bruises and minor wounds across his body. In fact, let's do a small thought experiment of someone making that claim. When Piccolo performed his light grenade against Imperfect Cell, which is the huge ki blast he uses when Imperfect Cell is walking towards him, the attack, or meaning the light grenade, is, though it's devastating to Piccolo and 17, left less damage on Imperfect Cell than Tien's attack did on Cell's next stage of evolution. And if, say, you put Android Saga Trunks or Goku or Vegeta even in their Super Saiyan forms in front of both techniques, and you think the light grenade would obliterate them but the Neo Tri-Beam would not, then you might want to reevaluate your thought process. However, enough about its power. We also need to realize that the Neo Tri-Beam was also an improvement of speed. In the 23rd World Martial Arts Tournament, when Goku asks Tien if he plans on using the Tri-Beam, Tien says with Goku's speed there is a good chance he would dodge it. And Goku's and Tien's differences in power there is nothing compared to the differences in Cell and Tien's power in the later saga. And Cell cannot escape Tien's barrage. So unless you want to argue that Tien's reaction speed is equal to that of Cell's, then it's clear Tien exponentially improved the attack speed as well. So now that we have established the upgrade's benefits, let's explore the stuff we don't know. A question that has to be asked for the Android and Cell arcs is why Tien did not use the technique sooner, if it is so powerful, though there are a few obvious reasons. The first two reasons are pretty easy, and they're kind of fourth wall breaking. One, Toriyama did not make it up until later in the saga. We don't know that, but it's a good possibility. Though it is also likely he was cooking something up for Tien all the way back in the Namek saga. The second reason is also pretty easy to guess, which is, well, we wouldn't have an Android saga if Tien blasted the Tri-Beam into Jiro's lab as soon as the door opened. However, those are, again, fourth wall reasons. I would say there are a few good in-universe reasons as well. Firstly, it is entirely possible that Tien himself did not know how strong the technique was. We can't say that for sure, but considering he likely never used it on anyone, much less someone as strong as Cell, before its introduction in the series, it makes me think he might not have known if it could kill an android or a Super Saiyan. Another good reason is that about 98% of the time in that saga, Tien's allies were already fighting the androids and he did not want to hit them. And of course, last but not least, even though the Neo Tri-Beam does take away a lot of the Tri-Beam's weaknesses, it doesn't negate them entirely. It still does cost him Genki, or Life Force, and the drain on him is still dangerous. In fact, even though he was able to hit Cell a dozen or more times once Android 18 was gone, Tien was dying when he was done. In fact, before he even attacks Cell, he says, "I'm sorry, Chaozu, I think I'm going to die," knowing full well going all out with that attack would end with his death, no matter what Cell did. Which is one reason why Dragon Ball Super doesn't give the technique the proper respect. It's not Tien's basic attack or Tien's go-to attack. It's a difficult, dangerous technique Tien was able to master and only will use as a last resort. But let's get back to the technique. Now that we know what the upgraded version can do, we're still in the dark about something that's never explicitly explained, and that is, when did Tien develop the Neo Tri-Beam, or Shin Kikoho? And this is where we can only go into speculation territory, though it's safe to say there are only two options of when he could have created it, either on King Kai's planet, or during the 3-year training arc between the arrival of Trunks and the introduction of the androids. Let's go with the first one, for now. It's safe to say that King Kai's planet is the most ideal place in the universe to learn and master such a dangerous technique. Since the Tri-Beam depletes life force, it's better if you're already dead, because you know you can't lose anymore. It's the same thing with Goku learning and mastering Super Saiyan 3 in the afterlife, because he has a harder time using it when he's alive, because the energy drain is so great. Not to say Super Saiyan 3 drains life force, necessarily, but it's the same principle. Anyway, we also have this panel back when Tien, Yamcha, Chaozu, and Piccolo arrived on King Kai's planet, where Tien has some inner dialogue with himself, stating that he will take King Kai's training and use it in his own way. Or I guess it'd be inner monologue since it's not two people talking. Anyway, fuck it. And if you've seen my Kaioken video, you know about my theory there. Considering Tien is shown consistently being able to master techniques very easily, and creates techniques no one else can replicate, if anyone other than Goku could learn the Kaioken or the Spirit Bomb or Genkidama, it's him. Which means it's fairly likely, considering the panel, and Tien's knowledge of Kaioken later during Goku's fight with Frieza, that he learned King Kai's techniques and used that knowledge in order to create the Neo Tri-Beam, or Shin Kikoho. Since the Tri-Beam uses Genki, and the Genkidama calls forth Genki, the knowledge of the technique could have unlocked something Tien had not previously known. And on the other side of the coin, with Kaioken, Tien could have incorporated the Kaioken into the Tri-Beam in order to create a more powerful version. Though honestly, if I had to make a call here, I would say he used his knowledge of the Kaioken to not just learn how to multiply his base power, but he utilized the knowledge to multiply the Tri-Beam's multiplier, making the attack have an exponential growth in strength. Now, of course, this is all guesswork, but learning the Neo Tri-Beam on King Kai's planet seems to be the most ideal option, and what he would learn could have greatly benefited in the technique's creation. Also, something people never talk about is how Until Goku's second death, when he sacrificed himself against Cell, and when he was gone for those 6 or 7 years, it was not Goku who spent the most time with King Kai. It was actually Tien and Chaozu. When training for the arrival of the Saiyans, Goku spent about 158 days training on King Kai's planet, not including his time on Snake Way. Tien Shinhan and Chaozu, on the other hand, spent around 260 days at King Kai's, not counting the rough month it took to cross Snake Way. So Tien had ample time to learn a new technique. More than 100 days over Goku, actually. And of course, later when Future Trunks arrives and warns everyone of the androids, and everyone is deciding on what to do, Bulma brings up the idea to find the Dragon Balls and wish to know Dr. Gero's location so they could kill him before the androids appear. And it's Goku, Vegeta, and Tien that say they want to fight. And even though I do think Tien is stronger than people tend to give him credit for, it is also likely he had this ace up his sleeve already, having created it on King Kai's planet, which makes him more confident here. Although the one problem with Tien creating the upgraded version on King Kai's planet is the why. Why would he bother with his most dangerous technique when he himself knows he should never use it unless absolutely necessary? It's easy to see why he would develop it during the 3-year time skip, because obviously in 3 years, the Earth could be dominated by killer machines, and so he creates it there in order to make sure that doesn't happen. Perhaps it's because the original version of the technique failed to kill Nappa and he wanted to fix that mistake in case something like that ever happened again, but he obviously had no idea there would be androids more powerful than Frieza coming up, so it's still a bit odd. As for the 3-year training arc, I already gave one reason just then, which is the necessity in developing it for fighting the androids, but also one needs to remember Tien Shinhan's character. Unlike Goku, and even compared to the rest of the cast, Tien seems to take things more seriously than most. Except that one time. And Tien knows what it's like to be redeemed, to face your demons and realize being a good person is a better path than the path of cruelty or evil. And I think that makes Tien realistically wary of other evil characters. He was pretty realistically wary of Piccolo Jr. more than anyone else other than Goku after King Piccolo was destroyed in the 23rd tournament, talking to Goku about it, and still believing Piccolo's alliance with them during the Saiyan saga might not last forever. And it is also clear that Tien took Vegeta's extremely blatant death threats to Goku and everyone else for years, up until the Buu saga, very seriously. Even when Goku and Tien say they want to fight the androids, when Bulma says it's a better idea to use the Dragon Balls, Vegeta threatens her life. And of course, before that, Tien tells Vegeta that working with him sickens him, because unlike Tien or Piccolo, for that matter, Vegeta does not redeem himself. He is a blatantly evil character throughout the Android arc, up until the last part of the Cell games, and even then, he seems more neutral than actually heroic. In fact, it's a huge milestone for Vegeta to even admit that he's sorry, so I wouldn't give him a medal for that. But all of this is to say, Tien could have had a sort of Green Arrow kind of contingency plan, to use DC Comics reference or analogy. Green Arrow is known in the comics to have a special arrow for each member of his team in case they went rogue. Considering Vegeta, who is still saying he is going to surpass and kill Goku, and then likely everyone else, is flying around trying to become a Super Saiyan, it's very likely Tien developed the Neo Tri-Beam in order to kill Vegeta if he ever made good on those threats, just in case. If Tien cannot transform into a Super Saiyan, he can apparently develop a technique that can destroy one. Also, another reason why he might have created it during the 3-year training arc was because of his own martial arts pride. It seemed that since Goku could become a Super Saiyan and learned a new technique, meaning the instant transmission, Tien probably felt he needed to step up his game in order to compete somehow. At this point, he is likely still wanting to fight Goku at some point, just not kill him like Vegeta wants to. Also, it would be remiss of me to not mention Tien's usage of the technique during the latter half of the Buu arc, when he appears and helps Mystic Gohan, or Ultimate Gohan, and he uses it to save Dende, Hercule, and Bee from a blast from Buu tanks. I think it's pretty obvious he is using the Neo Tri-Beam, since there is literally no reason not to, and it is less dangerous to use than the original Tri-Beam, but for some reason Dragon Ball Wiki, and I think a few other sources, just call it a Tri-Beam. As much as I would like it to have been just a regular Tri-Beam, since that would indicate he could do even more, when Super Buu gets tired of it and creates an even larger ball of ki, Tien admits he cannot stop that one, which implies that he was already using the Neo Tri-Beam or upgraded version with his first attack. By the way, there is a claim online going around, and in fact it's in Dragon Ball Wiki too for some reason, that says Tien's Neo Kikoho or Neo Tri-Beam is a technique that multiplies the user's power by 100. I, nor my friend Clearin, when he looked around, we could not find any actual source for that. So it seems like it is just conjecture and not a real figure. So we should just ignore that number, but I did want to bring it up in case someone watched this video and wanted to comment that. Alright guys, thanks for watching the video. Please like, comment, and subscribe if you feel like I deserved it. It was so fun making this video because Tien's my favorite character. And next time we will begin to dive into the Android saga. See ya!
Hey Tien! You know a lot of different techniques, right? You can generate 2 extra arms and split yourself into 4 and other cool stuff, right?
Go tanks. Techniques like those aren't for show.
Whoa! You're so cool! Techniques like those aren't for show.